Hello, hello, hello. I'm going to be looking away sometimes because I've spent the last couple days researching this, as well as um, the last 3 hours heavily. I'm falling asleep here doing it, and I know I won't be able to get up in the morning and do this, so I want to do it right now. And we hear often that Ancel Keys was the reason for this war on fat. Everybody likes to point the finger at Ancel Keys. I was one of those people as well because I listened to everybody else that thought the same thing. Ancel Keys was not the reason why we have the fat epidemic that we have. And the big smoke screen, hopefully by the end of this, will be released and you'll actually see things a little bit different, and then maybe you can partially educate other people or correct other people in that matter in a nice, kind way and not a dogmatic way. We like to hear our medical professionals tell us the history on things, but I think a lot of times whenever our medical professionals teach us the history on things, they don't actually look into how far back it goes. They don't look into how other people were involved and heavily influenced a lot of the history that's put out now, instead of the small articles and stuff that people have dug and dug and dug to actually come up with this information to teach us these things. I want to share with you days of me digging because I have time to do that, and hours of me digging because I have time to do that. And I hope you'll stay to the end of this video because I'm going to cover some very interesting topics. And I hope this draws awareness to why we've been lied to for so long and why we're still continuing to get lied to, because people simply don't take the time to dig into as much research as possible and figure out where the money trails come from, who's getting paid off, who's being involved in these different types of changes throughout the history when the information really is there. We just don't talk about it. And I hope you get to see this before this video gets removed, because I'm not sure if it will get removed or not. But when you talk about a company that's so large as the company that I'm going to expose right now, that I'm going to show you what's been happening the last few days, and especially the last few hours of jotting down notes and trying to wrap my mind around whether or not I even wanted to talk about this. I didn't know that I would have the nerve or the guts to talk about this, but I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there now. By the end of this video, you will rethink about exactly who you thought the real cause was. I'm going to show you why Dr. Berry had it wrong, Dr. Berg had it wrong, these other medical professionals had it wrong. I'm going to show you why I had it wrong, why I believed what was being put in front of my face because of the short-term studies that were done, the very brief looking things up. I'm not here to make you mad or upset at anybody. I'm here to share with you the truth. We hear the stories about Ancel Keys, the professor at the University of Minnesota back in 1948. He was a vegan professor. He set out to accomplish this 21, 22 country study. And when it was all said and done, he only came back with 7 countries that were partially showing causation, correlation, whatever you want to call it, to saturated fat being the main reason why we had cardiovascular disease. That is not what was going on. There are a number of things that happened before that, before Ancel Keys even got the notion to actually make himself famous by creating this. Ancel Keys did this because he wanted to be known for something. He was simply a geeky doctor that not a lot of people respected. He wasn't well known, and he wanted to be well known for something, because you have to think back in the 1948, 1950s, 1960s, we have this era where people are starting to be recognized and respected, and there were very few companies and big organizations before that that actually were thought of as the top companies or top people in the world. There were a number of things that happened during that whole entire era that led up to Ancel Keys doing what he did with the whole fat is what you need to be afraid of. And he created this basically guide that the American Diabetes Association, the American Heart Association, the American Dental Association, the American Medical Association to this day still use because it was put out by a professor. The reason it was a smokescreen is because the money trail that was involved that went along with it. The reason we still believe today that this is the reason why this happened is because that's all the information that we have. But if you sit down and you take the little bit of time to dig into what exactly happened 50 years before that, 60, 70, 80, 100 years before that, you'll see he was not the reason why this happened. He simply wanted to capitalize on something that was starting to build anyway before that. He wanted to capitalize on making himself known for something when no scientist, no professor has stepped up and said, this is the reason why we're getting sick. This is the reason for cardiovascular disease. He saw an opportunity and he capitalized on it. He was not a stupid man by any means. He wanted to be known for something, and still to this day, people think he is the reason why we have this hypothesis that cardiovascular disease is caused by saturated fats. When you break down the reason for cardiovascular disease, it's not because of saturated fat. We can say that high amounts of LDL in the blood, or serum LDL, can cause cardiovascular disease, but the majority of what saturated fat deposits or has in the blood are large LDL particles. These are not the cause. We're looking for small, dense stuff. The large stuff is not what's going to cause this. That's not the issue here. But we're led to believe that it is. I'm going to take you through the notes that I've wrote down and the hours that I've spent doing this, and hopefully by the end of this unedited, raw video, where I'm not flashing pictures in front of your screen and I'm not trying to show you this and show you that to convince you, I'm going to go off the words that I wrote down based off of 30 different articles, Wikipedia searches, going back as far as I possibly can and looking at the money trails that are involved with this stuff. And maybe by the end of this, you'll honestly comment and say, wow, I had no idea. I didn't even know, because I didn't think to go that far back. I didn't think to figure out who was involved in all of this. I want to begin now. I titled this Where It All Went Wrong, dietary-wise. In 1977, the government tells the people to eat less fat. That's not actually when it started, but that's when it's documented as. In 1948 to 1950, the war on fat really began then, but really did it? It did not. During this time, cardiovascular disease was increasing. Dwight D. Eisenhower, president, fell prey to this. What he ended up doing was cutting out fat and adopting this no-fat, lean diet that had to do with fruits, grains, and vegetables. After doing this for some time, he actually ended up having medical issues. He had a heart attack, something to that extent. Thus began the push to nail saturated fat as the culprit, because this must be the reason why. Saturated fats were thought of as the culprit to cardiovascular disease, raising LDL, the bad cholesterol, when, to begin with, LDL is not even a cholesterol. It's a low-density lipoprotein. It is the bus driver for cholesterol that takes it to the inflammation spot so it can actually do its job. High-density lipoprotein comes behind it and wipes the excess away, and then it is either cycled out of the system or recycled through the liver. One or the other. Don't quote me on that exactly, but that's the gist of it. So we have a purpose for these things to begin with. My story is I eat boatloads of saturated fat. Real saturated fats. Butters, ghee, lard, tallow, fat right off the meat in an abundance, tons of eggs, bacon. I gorge myself with this food, and my lipid profile is better than 99.9% of the vegans out there that will actually show them. My lowest profile so far on 15 months of a carnivorous diet when I had it done, which I'm even longer now, was 108 LDL, 62 HDL, and 52 triglycerides. For a guy that's overweight, still out of shape, and does not do a lot of physical activity, I didn't at the time anyway, how am I so healthy lipid profile wise, if this was true. Obviously, I'm not an anomaly. Obviously, I'm not a fit person that can say, oh, I'm fit and I run and I do all these things. That's not what happens. It's because it's a lie. People respond differently to cholesterol, their lipids, HDL, LDL, all these things. You have people that are super lean out here that have a cholesterol score of a total cholesterol score of 3, 4, 5, 6, 700, and they're athletes thriving. We have it all wrong. This eventually led to the Adapted Solid Health Guidelines in 1980, where they actually put out hard fact, stay away from animal products with fat, and eat lean meats, vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. This began the massive increase in processed junk food, but did it? Not at this time. It was going on before that. But history wants us to think this is when it began. That is not when it began. It began it began about 14 to 15 years earlier than that, but we don't have it documented. But I can show you the history if you follow the timeline. People ate this stuff like it was going out of style. Cookies, cakes, muffins, candies, ice creams, frozen processed meals, took away the natural fats that were in yogurt and stuff, created margarine, all these things that people thought they had to have, and they gorged themselves with it. Refined sugars and carbs replaced natural fats and crept into our diet every single day, week in, week out, month in, month out, year after year, and cardiovascular disease did not change. It got substantially worse. Increases of hundreds of %. Increased fat stores in junk food raised insulin and blood sugar levels, which led to more diseases, more conditions, more disorders. Triglycerides went through the roof. LDL wasn't so much the problem anymore. What we should be looking at are other lipid categories that we don't pay attention to because the government says that we should look at LDL. That is not correct. LDL is not the precursor to cardiovascular disease. We have to look at the raised insulin levels, the blood sugar levels, and what happens to our triglycerides and the inflammatory markers in the body in general. When the fat stores were replaced with when fat was replaced with junk food, insulin and blood sugars raised, causing type 2 diabetes to skyrocket. Dr. Ronald Cross discovered through a study, and high LDL may cause CVD, although LDL isn't the same in all forms. Different foods affect LDL differently. Large particles don't seem to cause the same thing as small particles do. What foods are exactly causing your conditions while you're eating it? If you can be on a carbohydrate-based diet with sugars and refined carbs and stuff like this, and your LDL goes up, we can test to see, is it the big particles or is it the small particles that seem to be more in abundance? What is causing the problem? The medical board did not want to hear that. They did not want to adapt that lifestyle. It was swept under the rug. And ironically, I go to PubMed, ncbi.gov, and I try to look up his study. It's removed. It is not even present. The links that I found to other people's articles that they wrote on this that linked you to the PubMed NCBI studies say when you go there, error. It's not even there anymore. It's removed. Saturated fats increase large particle LDL, which is harmless, not causing CVD, no correlation whatsoever. This doctor spoke about this back then, telling them that they were completely wrong about all this, but nobody would listen. Swept it under the rug. Non-processed fats are healthy, not saturated fats in processed foods, burgers, things like this that actually do make people sick. In December of 2017, or December 17, 2018, just last year, the ADA released its lifestyle management standards, stating a low carbohydrate diet may benefit diabetics, reducing medicine and insulin. But why are we just now talking about this? Why are our keto doctors and stuff just now bringing this up? Because back when they were doctors before, 10, 15 years ago, they were actually starting to talk about a low carbohydrate diet being used then. In 2008, they actually stated they actually started talking about a low-carb diet, but for only 1 year with doctor supervision. And this started being talked about back in 2008. Between 2008 and 2007, when they said don't use a low-carbohydrate diet, it's not safe. In 2008, something changed in there. What happened between 2007 and 2008 that made the American Diabetes Association change their mind? In 2007, it was a no, it's going to kill you, all this other stuff. And in 2008, they're starting to say, well, wait a second. Studies are starting to show that a low-carbohydrate diet can probably be used to manage insulin and blood sugar levels. So what changed between 2007 and 2008 that then made them all of a sudden do this flop? And why are we just now talking about this in 2018 and 2019 that for the last 10 years, they were actually considering it being useful? But we don't hear that on the keto groups. We don't hear that on the other YouTube channels. We don't hear our doctors talking about that. This was being talked about as early as 2008. But just December 2018 is when we're actually showing that they're actually fitting some kind of standard for dietary management for diabetics to be used as a low-carbohydrate diet? How does that make any sense? This has been going on longer than that. We're just starting to put it in the books as it's a management tool now. 2017, they recommended calorie restriction. 2018, they're saying, okay, we can use low-carb management as a tool under doctor recommendation. Well, they said the same thing back in 2008, except they added a 1-year mark to it. No more than that. Well, back then, they're saying that it could be used, but now it doesn't make any sense. This stuff is not adding up because people aren't doing the research. They're not digging further and further and further back. Physicians report diabetics on a low-carbohydrate diet substantially reduce the medicines that they take on a daily basis, metformin, insulin, things of this nature. October 18th, 1907. This is where the fun begins. This is where I'm going to take you through a little timeline journey on exactly what happened, my opinion on it at the end, and tie into my original statement when I talked about Ancel Keys and the reason why he did what he did, and why it makes a lot more sense to me following the history my way and not saying that he's the issue here, because he's not. October 18th, 1907, German chemist Edwin Kaiser propositioned Proctor and Gamble about hydrogenating food, the hydrogenation of food. They bought into it. But it wasn't then that it became apparent. It was very sly when this was done. One of the first which could be found anywhere was cottonseed oil, hydrogenated, which found its way into kitchens, restaurants, people's homes, everywhere. Before this, natural fat was from animals. People didn't have any other fat. Even Procter & Gamble back in 1837 made lard. They sold the lard to people. They were promoting natural fats. But all of a sudden this German chemist comes up with this hydrogenation way of doing things, and he changes everything. We see dollar signs. We start seeing somebody by the 1900s that already had $1 million in sales, which was years before this happened. Somebody with money that nobody else had. We're not looking at the right place here. Ancel Keys was not the problem. Stay with me. Procter & Gamble's market cap right now is $266 billion. They are sitting at $106 billion right this second, but their market cap is $266 billion. They have hair products, mouth products, Crest, Pepto-Bismol, medicine. They're in the Vicks and all this other stuff. House products, dish strainers, soaps, laundry soaps, cleaning chemicals, toilet paper, tissues, makeup, deodorant. They have their hands in every freaking thing that we touch. Procter & Gamble started in 1837 by two men. William Proctor, a candle maker from Cincinnati. James Gamble from Ireland, a soap maker. In 1850, they trademarked, well, let me back up a second. 1837, they created the Soap and Candle Company. In 1850, they trademarked their company, $1 million in sales, 80 employees. Are you kidding me? In 1850, to be already that successful with $1 million in sales and 80 employees working for you, you are one of the largest companies in the world. In 1883, they launched the Ivory soap brand. It took over. I mean, there was nothing like that back then. In 1911, they started selling Crisco vegetable oil. Remember when I told you the chemist approached them with hydrogenation? When that was in 1907. They didn't release their first version of hydrogenated oil until 1911. When this happened, all of a sudden saturated fat started being reduced. But we think of it as Ancel Keys. No. When you have one of the largest, if not the largest company in the world at the time, doing something of this scale, creating something that's supposed to be thought of as more heart healthy and all that, healthier for you to use, and animal products are getting pushed out of the way, how could we blame something on Ancel Keys when that's not even where it started? That's not even close to where it began. In 1911, they released the Crisco vegetable oil product. In 1930, they buy the British soap maker. In 1946, Tide detergent. In 1955, Crest toothpaste. 1950, they start the processed foods. They start the potato chips, the peanut butters, the things that we didn't have before. Guess when food allergies started? You guessed it, 1945, 1950, 1955. We didn't have these allergies before then. We didn't have these conditions and stuff before then. We didn't have all the processed foods and stuff before then. Why are we blaming somebody? One stupid, idiotic man that was nothing but a geek that wanted a well-known name for himself. It was not him that started this. None of that was him. He just took off with an idea that had to be presented by a professional so he could be known for something. In 1950s, they started the potato chips, the Jiffy stuff, the peanut butter, the coffees, and stuff of this nature. In 1960, the American Dental Association endorses their product. I'm sure money was involved, don't you? How do you have something like Colgate being promoted as the #1 product for how many years, and then all of a sudden they come in with some money? They buy Crest or they create Crest in the 50s, and all of a sudden you slide some dollars under the table, large amounts of dollars under the table, and all of a sudden Colgate, that they've been promoting for years as the #1 product for dental health, gets pushed out of the way. Nobody's got more money than them at that time. They want to be known. They've got money. Money, honey. That's what it takes. In 1956 was the other one. At that point, whenever they started coming up with the processed foods and things of this nature, back when the allergies started, the processed foods, the hydrogenated oils started coming into the scene more and more and more. The push for more of the grain type stuff, because that's where a lot of the oils and stuff come from. Where do you think this all came from? It didn't come from Ancel Keys. We are looking at the completely wrong person here. In 1961 or 1956, back when the Jiffy and all that other stuff, the potato chips and stuff like that started, $1 million in sales at that point. In 1961, disposable diapers. We didn't have anything like that before. Babies were raised naturally with cloth diapers. You wash their diapers, you changed them naturally. They didn't get the rashes and stuff like we have now. They didn't. I mean, this was something that popped up out of nowhere, and it was like the answer to all of mom's woes and stuff like that. The dirty diapers they didn't have to put their hands in it anymore. They didn't have to do all that. So they created this plasticky type, cottony type diaper that can be thrown away. Disposable diaper. In 1968, highly processed foods are everywhere at this point. Procter & Gamble have their hands in everything. You're talking about ice creams, cakes, peanut butters, all kinds of snacks, cookies, crackers, everywhere. And a lot of people think that these names that are on the product are the ones that actually were funding and creating this. No. Procter & Gamble are behind almost everything from back in that era. 1982, products like NyQuil and Pepto. 1988, beauty products of all kinds. 1989, heavy into makeup, women's push to stand up, be equal, rebel, be on your own, be your own individual and stuff like that. You notice when women started separating from how they grew up, where they thought they were suppressed, where they thought they didn't have to be the mom of the house anymore, where they can go out and get the same jobs and stuff like that. But before that, regardless of what we think, just think about the era. It was stay home, raise the kids, be there for your husband and stuff. Be a family mom. Relax, enjoy your life. You've seen pictures and videos and stuff of them going on camping trips and stuff as a family and stuff, and the dad kind of standing up as the leader of the family, the mom kind of holding everybody together and stuff like that. But then came the 80s, and then all of a sudden this big push for more makeups, more hair colorings, more design, more peacock looking, green and blue and yellow and stuff all over the place, the hair bands and all this other stuff back then. Heavy into makeup. They start creating all these other brands, marketing things, commercials and stuff like that to make people buy their products. In 1991, buys Max Factor, Revlon, Pantene. Pantene wasn't anything until Pantene back in 85 was nothing. They were just a regular shampoo company. But come 1990, 1991, 1992, whenever Procter & Gamble buys them, now we're talking millions of dollars in sales, or $1 million in sales already. There's a reason for this. This whole push from the beginning of time that we need these products, we need this makeup, we need this cool stuff, we need to rebel, we need to act this way, has been driven and marketed by companies with big money from the beginning of time. And a lot of people like to point at you and me and the young kids in this and that era and all this other stuff. We've been driven by money for a long time to live a certain type of life, a certain type of way, because these big companies need more money in their pocket. And if we don't act, don't buy, or don't say or do things a certain way, they don't make money. And from the beginning of time, these algorithms, these ways that they provide money and treatment and marketing for things, they know exactly what they're doing. So where we're at today, we're at a push to reverse all of this. We're at a push to stop listening to the government. We're at a push to stop buying into big companies and stuff like that. But as we push, they push harder. As we rebel against the government, the police, and all this other stuff, they push harder. As we stop feeding and funding our towns and our cities and stuff like that into their dirt, where our politicians and everything else are making tons of money, $500,000 retirement checks every year while retired, while there are still people out here putting out fires, birthing babies, working jobs where they actually need money, and children and stuff like that need stuff for school and things like that. But yet this has been going on since the beginning of time. These big companies are in the pockets of the politicians, they're in the pockets of our medical providers. They are in the pockets of everybody. And if you don't do what they say, you don't get paid. They say that money doesn't make the world go around. To good, honest people, that may be true. To good, honest people that don't need a lot and can live a very, very simple life, that may be true. This world is driven by money and greed. And whether it takes blood, sweat, or tears for somebody to get there, they'll do it, no matter if it's a good, honest, hard way, or whether it's the dirty, backstabbing way that's been going on since 1837, when Procter & Gamble came into business as an innocent candle and soap maker. That from the beginning of time have been investing money to make this world and society be driven a certain type of way that it is today. They are a huge contributing factor on why things are the way they are today. They are a huge contributing factor on why our medical standards, why our obesity, our conditions and diseases, and the grain companies and the chemicals and stuff are used in the food that we are today, because we've been driven to crave. We've been driven to think that we need these things, to live off these things, to think that we're gonna be destroyed if we don't have them in our life. When you start introducing crack into a person's life and they become addicted to it, you can't just take it away all of a sudden and say, oh, no more crack for you. They go through withdrawals. Guess what happens? They start stealing so they can get enough money to go buy that crack, because if you don't give it to them, somebody else is going to. What do you think Procter & Gamble does to us when they do that kind of stuff? Do you think that Procter & Gamble just has their hands in this alone? Do you know how many times overseas when I was over there, I seen their names thrown around in big job openings? 54 point this $billion for this, 58 point that for that, 115 billion for this, 200 million for this. Their name was all over the place, along with Halliburton, Procter and Gamble. They were all over the place. Down in Louisiana, in a small town where I lived outside of Alexandria, Louisiana, there's a town called Pollock. I would leave from Pollock every day. Before I would even get to Ball, Louisiana, I could smell the smell of laundry soap, fabric softener, all this other stuff. They have got that entire town and the surrounding towns locked down, wrapped around the pinky of their finger, or wrapped around their pinky. Make them do whatever they want them to do. They want to wipe out a whole another entire area and build another facility. Guess what they'll do? They'll do it. When you're rolling up to this building, you see these huge, tall smokestacks and multi-level buildings that are just massive, something you've never even seen before, and just smoke billowing out of them. Just tons of stuff pouring out of them. But we're worried about the gasoline emissions, and we're worried about the diesel emissions and everything else. But these guys can build these massive, multi-story this and that, and just make their chemicals and their products and everything else, and just pump that crap right out into the atmosphere. But we won't say a damn thing about that. But we'll talk about a car that is producing emissions that probably is never, in the grand scheme of things, without, if we eliminated all this other stuff that's going on, going to cause that much damage to our atmosphere. When you look at the emissions coming out of a building like Procter & Gamble's building versus the diesel soot coming out of a truck, do you know the particles that come out of a diesel engine are so heavy they can't even make it to the atmosphere? There's no way they could even potentially damage it because they're so heavy. Science has already proven this. But yet we have these massive buildings pumping out these chemicals and stuff like that we use every single day, that we touch every single day. And we're worried about a diesel engine or a car engine, but yet we let these companies just destroy everything. And to think about the amount of products that they have that we use every single day that we cannot even go without. Products and companies that they bought where their name's not even tailored to it yet, but they own the company. That we'll never even know that they own it because this is financially secure. They probably have so many companies out there that make the products that we use. How many off-brand products do you think they own, company-wise? How many things that you pick up at the dollar store or, your general store or something like that, your $5 or less store or something, do you think that they own, that you'll never know that they own? When we already have the information that we have now, this video should tell you. If you do your research and you look back into the history, Ancel Keys was not the problem here. They've been at this since 1837. They've been gearing this that long, for as long as they possibly can, and they're still at it today. There's a number of things that point all this direction. When you look at the amount of vegetables, grains, well, let's leave vegetables out of it. When you look at the amount of grains that are being harvested, the amount of soap that's being produced, the amount of different types of allergies and things of this nature from circa 1940, 1950, 1960, and then all the dietary recommendations that come after that, all the medically prescribed and pushed things that come after that, almost all of them are going to lead right back to companies like Procter & Gamble. Our medical industry and our government does not give a shit about us. Excuse my language. They don't care about us. They want money. And as long as there's a company like Procter & Gamble out there that has enough money to pay them, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to get paid. And we're going to continue living the shit life that we live because there are companies out there like that don't give a damn about me or you. And as long as this keeps going on, if you follow the trail back to all the processed foods and stuff like that, you're going to find companies just like them are the ones that were putting it out, marketing it, pushing it, and making it a recommendation. They had their hands in every single pocket of people that were involved back then, more than likely. Think about what information you're getting. Think about if you really honestly believe after this video that Ancel Keys is the reason why he was a stupid, geeky professor that wanted to be known for something. And yes, he was wrong. Yes, he did cause a little bit of a pandemic, but it was not him that generated this. All right, guys. If you have any questions, ask. If you have not subscribed to my video, please, or my channel, please do so. There's going to be many more nights where I do stuff like this. And I just appreciate you. Thank you. I wish more people would speak out about this stuff. Thanks. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up.